Hey everyone, welcome back to From the Vault, the BitGo podcast. My name is Mike Gross, and I am very excited today to be sitting here with Bobby Zagotta. He is the Chief Business Officer of Subzero Labs. Nice to see you, Bobby. Thanks.
Great to see you, Mike.
Thanks for hanging out. I want to jump right into things. That you have been in the crypto industry for a bit, but I think your story is very interesting. I have my notes here. You've worked at Texas Instrument, PwC. You've done some consulting. You were managing director at a derivatives firm. You were the chief commercial officer at Kraken, CDO at Bitstamp, and now chief business officer at Subzero Labs. So you have quite the resume. No pressure.
Trying to say I'm old.
I would no, not a million years. But basically, yeah, you've been in the industry for a fair amount of time, and at some point in the last few years, the narrative kind of turned, especially on the institutional side, from this, hey, this looks interesting, we're maybe considering it, to okay, now we really need to be inside of this industry and it having some exposure. So, what in your experience and what you've seen, what drove that shift of mindset?
Yeah, well, first of all, it's every once in a while I step back and realize where we are versus where we were, and it's quite shocking. It is startling, frankly. And, I've been full time in this industry for 8 years, but I'm not really the OG. I mean, there are people who truly pioneered on that now almost 15 years and founded some of the most successful companies. Mike Belshe's one of them. And I should start by saying, like, the vision that these individuals had back then is amazing. And not only did they have that vision, but they stuck with it. They drove through a lot of controversy, a lot of cycles, and we just have an incredible debt to those guys for helping to create this industry. For myself, when I got involved, which was 2013, 2014, but when I became full-time in the spaces in 2018, and, we still felt like we were inventing. And it was already achieving a lot of interest on the retail side. But the institutional side was light years away, we felt. And literally, like, they didn't want to talk to you. But that progressed to what I would call innovation summer camp. So then all of the large financial institutions assigned their innovation office to look at blockchain and crypto and do experiments and create consortiums and create pilots and all of that. And many of us working for crypto exchanges or infrastructure companies got very, very excited, but those kind of pilots just went on and on and on. In my estimation, looking back, they weren't very serious. They were experimenting, and they were maybe trying to make it look like they were doing something with the space. But then a couple of things happened. The ETFs, that just can't be underestimated. What a profound change that put in, not just in the U.S., but globally, because it was a stamp of approval that prior to that it didn't exist in the U.S. And then today, given the regulatory changes that are underway in the U.S., it's a completely different conversation with institutions today. So in my estimation, they are now serious. They're serious about literally transferring specific workflows to blockchains, and in some cases, public blockchains or interoperable blockchains. And so that's very exciting, and it's high time because the efficiencies that are available are kind of undeniable and inevitable. So we've come a very, very long way, but we're right at the precipice of a future that was envisioned
15 years ago. Definitely. And you brought up the regulatory changes, which obviously is very interesting. It's in there. It's finally come time where the government's actually paying attention and taking some steps. Would you say that is like holistically, is good for crypto, or like, does it make it harder for some of these incumbent crypto companies, right? That, like, for example, like a Bitstamp or a BitGo, does it make it harder for them to compete because there is much more of a much easier path for these traditional financial institutions?
I think in some ways you could make the case that, it creates a whole new set of competitors in some areas. Companies from the traditional side who become custodians or other type players in the space. But I think that's kind of a drop versus a tidal wave of opportunity that comes when institutions get serious and actually start adopting some of these capabilities. And like I said, that's what I'm seeing now. The institutions, the level of conversations that we're having is just very different. It's gone from an experiment to, okay, we actually need to get out.
Yeah. And I mean, we hear all the time the phrase bridging TradFi and DeFi, and so I mean, so we hear it a lot. What do you think is the next step? Like, what would you say is there a barrier right now that is kind of keeping us from making the next step, or what do you think the next step will be? Is it this regulatory like gray area that still existing? Is there some sort of risk assessment that like hurdle that we need to get over?
Yeah, great question. So up until now, it's been primarily the regulatory barrier in this country. But, what happens in the US and from a financial services perspective informs what happens globally. But, in the last few years, other jurisdictions, Europe and Asia in particular, have taken great strides to be more open for business and more welcoming of these companies, which have given, whether they're US founded companies or otherwise, avenues to pursue. So I would say that's been the biggest issue. We're not all the way through that process, by the way, but now there's a level of confidence on the part of traditional financial services companies that they can get involved in a material way and not have a gun to their, regulatory guns on their head or a significant penalty. There are other issues, real life frictions. So if you think about it, blockchain technology was set up as a ledger. It's a distributed ledger to record transactions. And we're asking that core technology to do a lot more today. And it can do a lot more today, but mostly because we've had to bolt out a lot of peripheral capabilities. And so institutions that are really committed can find their way through all of those kind of peripheral requirements to access this technology, but it's still too hard, in my opinion. I worked for Subzero Labs. We're solving some problems along these lines, and our two co-founders, their vision was the real barrier to adoption is friction and barriers between Web 2, which is how the traditional world lives, and Web 3, which is where the crypto companies live. It's not unexpected because the crypto companies built this blockchain technology in a world where they weren't trying to bridge necessarily. They were trying to create an alternative.
They were literally trying to separate.
They're trying to separate it. So what Subzero Labs is doing and others is like, let's meet the institutions where they are. So our Riello blockchain, built by Subzero, has API connectivity. All the financial services runs on APIs. You don't need an Oracle. You don't need this kind of middleware in order to use data. And they also built it to be bidirectional, so you can ingest data via API at the chain level, and then also give instructions back. And that to me is one example of meeting institutions where they are. Right? That's how they operate today. They know how APIs work, and they don't have to create oracles or other kind of middleware to get there.
And just for anyone that's listening, I mean, I know, could you just give us a very quick breakdown of what an oracle is and why oracles are important for blockchains?
Sure. Blockchains that manage transactions quite often have to do that based on some conditions, and those conditions are governed by a smart contract, and the smart contract requires data that can only be available to a blockchain via an oracle. And there's oracle providers, but they're third parties, so they create dependencies. They also create vulnerabilities, if you want to look at it just from a security perspective. And they also create cost and or kind of other considerations whenever you're dealing with a vendor. So that's just one example of when you're an enterprise and you want to use this technology, that's a variable that you'd like to not have. Other variables are like interoperability. So if I'm an enterprise today and I want to launch a stable coin or access liquidity, I have to deal with like 10 different chains. There's 8 or 10 chains out there that have meaningful kind of activity, users, and liquidity. And I want to be available everywhere. Now I need an engineering team for, for all these different blockchains, and I have to somehow figure out how to connect. So that's a friction that, of course, nobody envisioned when they were defining the blockchain capabilities in the last decade. But from an enterprise perspective, it has to be simplified away. So again, it's another issue that with the Subzero team is working on.
So I think, correct me if I'm disturbing. Basically, you're kind of saying that a way to get over the next hurdle essentially is actually making it easier for developers. It's actually making it for these tech tools like to integrate an API as opposed to these like complicated, fragmented blockchain technology.
Yep.
You mentioned interoperability. I ask, this is maybe a hot question, but like, do we really need another layer one, right? Like, is that the solution?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. It's a valid question. To me, the challenge is, with many of the blockchains that have come out in the last 5 years, let's say, from a technology capability perspective, they're nearly identical. How they operate, how they're architected, this Oracle dependency, this interop dependency, different things like that. The focus has been do it faster, and so they've been working on speed, but the speed at the blockchain level is only partially valuable if you have all these middle intermediate steps that you need to go through that affect speed. So, and speed is most important for like trading use cases and other use cases, but not all use cases. As one of our co-founders likes to say, like a fast car is only so useful if you're in traffic. You know what I mean? Like the real innovation at the architecture level for blockchains is necessary right now for enterprises to get on board. It's not just about speed, it's about taking away these vulnerabilities and connecting to the rails that they use and they have today, or APIs. One other thing I'll throw in the mix is privacy. So I'm talking to a lot of enterprises right now, and this is obviously, an acid, the test level question from them is like, can I manage privacy at the transaction level, at the customer level, is different levels? And if the answer is maybe, that's not going to work for the vast majority. And there are blockchains out there that can deliver a private permissioned blockchain experience. But what if you want liquidity outside of that, right? So, the Subzero solution is it should be a slider. You should be able to select. I could be like completely private, 100% permission, or I could be completely open, or I could be at gradations. That's the way enterprises think. Let me tailor the experience to my needs and my customers' needs.
Right. So you're kind of describing like a traditional software company almost, as opposed to, yeah. Okay.
It does start feeling like a SaaS experience, which again, enterprises understand.
Yeah. It's very interesting. You talked about speed, you talked about privacy. These are, of course, buzzwords that are running around the industry a lot. What would you say, is there a narrative right now that you think is actually overhyped, that maybe isn't where we need to be going?
Yeah, great question. So I think that to your earlier question, the kind of idea of launching an L1, launching a token, managing a hype cycle, if you will, nobody maybe really understands how the token value relates to what's happening on the chain. That is it's a business model that has worked very, very well and created a lot of value for individuals and for businesses. But I think that's fading now. I think as institutions get more involved, and as frankly as the bar gets reset higher in terms of what we should expect out of blockchains and blockchain foundations and blockchain companies, that more hype-driven idea is probably a little bit outdated. This people expect, whether it's a blockchain company or something else, to like deliver real solutions that address real problems that people will pay for, and there's real revenue attached to. These are, this is the maturing, if you will, of this industry, and it's positive.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's like you're literally describing like the maturation process. Yeah. Yeah. Again, it's super interesting. There is a lot of noise now about autonomous agents and how they're going to be working, especially on top of crypto rails, right? Because, right, like agents are built from code, blockchains are built from code, they run on code, it's programmatic money. Is this a real business case in your mind? Like, are these autonomous agents? Yeah. But do you see this kind of playing out in a way that it is in a real, tangible outcome, I guess?
I do. There hasn't, because only been a few instances in my life where every day I read something else about a trend or a phenomenon that blows my mind. So like my mind was blown on Tuesday, and then it was blown again on Wednesday. And it's like this side of the world and of technology is just evolving so fast and is so inevitable in so many ways. And so everyone from, companies to foundations to individuals are all trying to figure out how, what it means for their institution or for their mission, and how to harness it in a way that's safe and that works for their customers or the community. And from my standpoint, stepping way back, at the macro level, I don't think agentic finance can exist without crypto and blockchain technology, without a trustless set of rails. Because what happens when there's a proliferation of agents that are permission to move money around, but you don't know which ones to trust? And in today's world, if you and I are transacting, I have your reputation, you have your reputation to sit back. I have your reputation to trust or not trust. But in an agentic world, agents are ephemeral. They can disappear, So the only way that works, in my estimation, is if there's a trustless system, meaning a programmable ability to verify that an agent has executed the code that it said it would, or that was necessary to say it would. And I even believe, and this is again something that we're working on, you can create a situation where, reward or payment only happens once this kind of blockchain transaction is verified.
Is there a world where we have we talk a lot about digital assets, we talk a lot about blockchain, we talk how it's kind of like maturing into the software company, we talk about how AI agents are going to be transacting and having some sort of agentic commerce. Do you see this world kind of becoming kind of like an invisible layer at some point? So like right now, obviously, like we use our phones, we on the internet, like no one ever thinks about the internet. We don't ever think about card networks when we pay for something. Are we going to stop thinking about crypto and blockchain? Like, are we going to get to a point where it's just, oh yeah, that is how money moves?
Yes,
absolutely. Period.
Yeah, I also have a saying, the DeFi mullet. It's like Web 2 in the front and Web 3 in the back, and nobody even thinks about all of the trustless apparatus necessary to make it all work. That I think is how these types of technology industries grow up, and just like the internet, as you mentioned. But it also goes back to how institutions think too. They want something so reliable and so predictable that they don't have to think about it too much.
Have you ever made a controversial move that you still to this day are like, that was the right call?
Sure. I've also made the other count. We can talk about that, sir. I mean, the Bitcoin features example from CME is a good one. And again, not attributable just to me. Had a team of people that were very committed to innovating. And when I was there, I ran a division called Products and Services. The venture capital arm reported to me. They started bringing me crypto and blockchain investments in like late 2013. And at the time, I was like, I don't know, guys. But I got educated and we started investing in 2014. And the purpose of our venture team was to suss out new technologies and figure out what the strategic implications of them might be. And boy, I got to sit on some boards and really got a great education. And it frankly blew my mind in terms of both the possibilities for a company like CME Group, the opportunity, but also the risks, the threats. You know, this technology could really change and affect some of these business models. So we got really involved and proposed the Bitcoin futures product, and it was quite controversial. I mean, in 2016, when we were trying to get our board of directors to agree to this, it's like Silk Road. I mean, it's a very different world, and the word Bitcoin just had a very different connotation rate than it does today. But we were over beers sometime. I'll tell you the story, Ben. We were successful and very proud of that on behalf of the team that was involved in the Australian Reserve race. The other thing that comes to mind is, there's been, in the roles that I've played at crypto exchanges, there's been a lot of times where you could lean into the gray area, or you could stay above it. And, my instinct has always been to stay above it. Basically, don't even be innovative, be open, explore, but when push comes to shove, do it right. And that's not just because you should always do things right. It's also because in the last 8 years that I've been involved, I want the industry to succeed. But if the industry plays too fast and loose or too many things, it's not going to succeed. It's not going to achieve a level of credibility that matters, and that the rest of the world will rely upon, right? So, and I feel passionate about it. I really want the importance of and the utility of this technology be available to everyone and for everyone to take advantage of it. In the U.S., we think of this, it's quite recreational. It has been investing in Bitcoin or trading, meme coins, others. But in other parts of the world, it can be a lifeline. There's people who can't trust their institutions. They can't trust their government entities. They can't trust, therefore, they can't trust their currency. And they work their whole lives. They watch their wealth just, dissipate, so it's, or they're unbanked, so, I feel passionately that it has to become more available and more accessible, and that will only happen if it's trustworthy. And so without going into details, there's been a number of times where I've been faced with those types of choices, and always it's just, I try to adopt the long view.
Yeah, I like that a lot, actually. And I think, especially in the US, we read a lot of headlines, and a lot of it's centered around the speculative nature of crypto. And there really is this real functional, practical side that, we don't even see, is half the time you don't even see what's happening. And like you say, if around the world, it's changing a lot. But at the same time, going back to what we're talking about, it becoming invisible, it is also starting to change the financial system here in the States. So I love that a lot. And obviously we're all working towards it being trustworthy at legitimizing, for lack of a better word. We're basically out of time, but one last question.
Yes.
Do you have any hot takes about the industry today that you would be comfortable sharing?
Institutional adoption is very real today and happening fast, really exciting. And then this AI phenomenon and the synergies of agents and blockchain, and the cross necessity of those two things, at least the way I think of it, is exciting. I think if it wasn't for what's possible with blockchain, this agentic thing, would be very scary. But I think the two of them together will make it takes the entire set of capabilities and therefore experiences for customers and other things to to a next level. So really, really excited about that. Now, I don't want us to lose sight of the fact that we still have regulatory work to get through as a, in the U.S. and globally, because that's, that has to be codified. It has to be legislated. It can't be like at the whim of which administration is in power or which parties are. So that's another thing that I hope we don't lose sight of.
I agree. I think most people listening will agree with that too. Amazing. Bobby, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for taking the time, and hopefully we'll see you around soon.
Awesome. Great to see you.
Thanks a lot.